Speak. I'm your co host, J.R. Stewart.
And good evening, everyone. I am your co host, Tommy Duncan. Welcome.
And before we get started, a big thanks to Liquid for providing our background music, our theme music. And you may notice that we have a new virtual studio that we are using for Black Men Speak show. So I hope this is laid out a little and organized a little better than the last one. Although I did kind of like the books and the historic figures that we had listed, but I think this format will work a little better. Our chat line is open if you want to text your comments, and the phone line will be open in about 5 minutes. And for those who
Absolutely.
are new, please subscribe to the channel. And if you've watched the show before, go ahead and hit that like button and hit the notification button so you'll be updated when new shows are uploaded.
And so get that number ready 972-497-2280. Get that cell phone out, get that rotary dial phone out, go to the coin operated phone. So if you have something that you would like to speak to or ask questions, be ready for 972-497-2280 on Black Men Speak.
So with that being said, we've gotten all the operational stuff out of the way. And once again, the phone number is listed on the screen here for your convenience. And like I said, the phone number, I mean, the phone line will be open in about 5 minutes. Generally, about maybe 9:05 is when it opens up, and it will stay open until about 9:45. So we leave it open after the show, so people can still call in and leave comments. So Tom, what is the hot topic for today?
You know, we are going to talk about one of the most prevalent issues in our country today, um,
Don't say it, Tom.
obesity in America.
You said
And
it.
in particular, within our community, Jimmy, this is, there are a lot of issues that we are dealing with right now as a result of this healthcare pandemic that we've been dealing with since, at least officially since March of this year. But one of the things that has been a chronic issue in America, and that is a chronic issue in the Black community in particular, is the issue of obesity within our community.
So Tom, so the point that you make is absolutely correct. It is an issue. The question for me is how did it become an issue?
Jimmy, that's a very good question. That's a very poignant question. And for what it's worth, I can't even say that it snuck up on us, but within the last generation, maybe generation and a half, we have come from a community, if we look at the latter part of the 20th century, where we look around, we're healthy. Not that there aren't issues that come up, but man, within the last generation, we've come from a country that was relatively healthy to one of the least healthy countries, industrialized nations in the world, Jimmy. Statistically speaking, two-thirds of Americans in general are either overweight or obese. And it, within the Black community, is even worse. Statistically speaking, I was looking at some studies, man. Um, Within our community, 80% of our women, that is, Black women, are either overweight or obese, and practically 70% of Black men are overweight or obese. And the reality of it, Jimmy, is a problem because when you deal with what we've been dealing with the majority of this year, this COVID pandemic, it exposes your healthcare immunity. I mean, it exposes your the weakness or the strength of your immune system. And Black and brown communities have been most impacted by COVID, and that's primarily because our immune systems, generally speaking, as a community, have been compromised.
Well, I agree with you. I disagree with you a little bit, Tom.
Okay.
Most of what you say is correct, but I'm going to go on record here. I've said this before, so this shouldn't be a shock to anyone. I do not believe that the COVID virus is naturally occurring. I mean, COVID viruses do exist in bats. Very seldom do they ever jump from bats to humans, even though people eat bats. And to go from bats to a mammal to humans is almost nearly impossible. So, with that being said, I do agree with you that it does attack people who tend to be sick or pre-existing conditions, but I don't think it's the conditions that the virus attacks. I think it's the medicines. I think if you're a person who's taking six or more pills every single day to stay alive, if you have high blood pressure, there's a good chance that you're taking a pill to deal with your high blood pressure. If your body retains water, I'm pretty sure you have a diuretic that causes you to urinate and release that water. If your kidneys are damaged, I'm pretty sure you're taking something to protect your kidneys. So we can keep the condition in check with the medicines, but so I don't think it's the condition that the virus is attacking. I think it's a cocktail of all these pills that we were putting into our body that's causing the problem. I think that cocktail plus the virus is lethal. And if you look at the elderly, you look at those who have health conditions, they have well, the thing they have in common. They take a lot of pills. And for people who don't take a lot of pills, like really young kids, they don't. Young people who are healthy, they don't seem to be that affected by it. So, and if you look at the characteristic of other viruses, Ebola, the common cold, influenza, um, those viruses, H1N1, it doesn't matter, swine, bird flu, pig flu, they all tend to attack people, period, regardless of age. I almost said irregardless. I know Carol will get mad at me for saying that word, but regardless of age, those viruses attack everyone pretty much across the board. This thing seems to attack people who take a bunch of pills, and that's my theory because I have no scientific evidence to back it up. But I think that this is something that the Chinese were working on behalf of the Obama administration, who were funding the research, and that this is going to be used at some point to weed out the population. It just got released too early.
But Jimmy, what you have to understand, if you're saying that people are taking all of these pills, they're taking pills for a reason. Taking pills because they're trying to deal or manage pain, sickness, inflammation,
Yes,
something that's going on in their body.
that's
And the
correct.
reality is, if they're dealing with pain, inflammation, or some sort of health disease, they're doing that because their body is not able to fight back or ward off what it is that's going on internally, whether that is through genetic issues that they have, whether that has to do with their diet over a period of time, whether it has to do with something else. Your immune system is your first line of defense in
Yes.
fighting anything external and internal. And the reality of it is, with this COVID epidemic or anything else that's out there, if your body is not strong enough to fight back against it, that is because of a weakened immune system. And so folks who are taking these pills by default, they have a compromised immune system.
They do, Tom, but okay, we're gonna move on because I want to get into the weight part of this. But just keep in mind that let's say if you are diabetic and you're
Okay.
on insulin, or you have type 2 diabetes and you're taking metformin or some other sugar blocker. Well, the pill or the medicine is helping to fix the condition of your body either not producing enough insulin, or you become insulin resistant because you're overeating. But either way, the medicine is causing your body to adjust in a way that allows you to live with the condition. But the virus comes along, and I think with the medicine in your body is enough to almost knock you out. So I'm not sure if you were not on the medicine and just had the condition that the virus would kill you. I don't know. We haven't done the research on live people, so. But let's get into the health part, Tom.
All right.
Here's the issue for me. I like watching Soul Train videos. I'll go
Okay.
online and watch, do a search on them, and pull up these old Soul Train videos that I watched as a kid. And Tom, here's the thing I noticed: all those people on Soul Train were fit. They wasn't
Yes.
just
Very, very healthy.
they wasn't thick. They wasn't overweight. They wasn't packing. Every last one of man, woman, and child on Soul Train was fit as can be. What happened? Where are Soul Train people?
Jimmy, they are. It's a different world. I mean, part of it has to do. A large part of it, Jimmy, has to do with food supply. I mean, you have to remember that you're talking about folks who in the second, well, third to fourth part of the 20th century, our food supply primarily came from small farming communities. And, basically, it's a completely different process and a completely different um, food supply that we're living with, eating from, and or dying from now. I mean, when you look at the first half of the 20th century, most of America was an agrarian society. You get through World War One, you get through World War Two. People start going into large cities, looking for manufacturing jobs. Coming off of World War Two, people begin to aggregate into larger communities. Over a period of a quarter or two, in the last part of the 20th century, you know, large companies, corporate America began to consolidate. Ultimately, cliff notes, they ran off the small farmers. Either they bought them out or they ran them out. And then you have the essence of the food supply, which became compromised. And then on top of that, Jimmy, you have to look at fast food America. I mean, McDonald's is less than 100 years old. But when you look at Ray Kroc and then you look at Kentucky Fried Chicken, you look at all of these other fast food enterprises, when we grew up, Jimmy, I can't speak for you, but most of me and my friends, we ate at the table at home. Mom cooked a meal or dad cooked a meal or whatever, was applicable, and we ate at the table. Jimmy, the
Yes,
status
that's
quo
true.
today is everybody's eating pizza or taco or fried chicken or something from a fast food place. Not to add to the fact that when you look at our schools, the majority of them are eating junk food, soda, potato chips, things of the high calorie foods. All of this is junk food. All of this is fatty, fast food that is inundating our bodies with tons of sugar, tons of salt, tons of what is it? High fructose corn syrup, high
Very
fructose
addictive
corn
stuff.
syrup that is literally breaking our bodies apart.
Well, Tom, that is true. So I want to talk about the cultural change because once again, when I watch my Soul Train videos, all those people, their BMIs are normal. Their weight is normal. And when did we go from that to the BMI index being racially what's a good word for it? Biased against black people? When did thick become acceptable? When did being overweight and obese become the new norm in the black community where we just accept it? I don't think Don would have let a size 20 woman or an overweight guy get up on that stage. It just
Well,
wouldn't have happened.
I don't think they would have been able to kick their heads up over their legs, Jimmy. But mass media, because when you look at those old Soul Train videos, man, you got people doing splits, kicking their
Yes,
legs over their head,
kicking up
and
and everything.
doing the bump and everything else. You got one of these, overweight, obese sisters, man. They would have knocked the brother off the stage. But all I'm saying is this, Jimmy: when our culture changed, when our country changed, our habits changed, our families changed, and as a result, you're seeing a byproduct of that. And this country's food supply is driven by a conglomerate of fast food America, the government, and those who regulate the food supply and or fast food. And it's a shame, and to a certain degree, Jimmy, it's quite criminal because when you look at the economic impact and what the lack of health is doing to our country and to our community, it is criminal. I was reading a study earlier this week. I think in 2014, Jimmy, a $2 trillion economic impact of the fallout of obesity in America, and that was
Yes.
2014. This is 2020. That was almost 3% of the gross domestic product, Jimmy, that was costing our country because of the health complications
I know.
related to being overweight and obese and or obese.
Well, Tom, the answer to this problem is to turn back the clock. I don't. When I was growing up, we were. My mother didn't have a lot of money. She was a working single mom most of the time, teaching school, so she didn't make a lot of money. And when we would go to the store, we never really got past the produce section. Maybe get bags of rice, beans, flour, um, some salt and pepper. If we had meat, it was generally the cheapest ground beef we could find. It was chicken wings, which are cheap back then, not like they are today. My mother would cut them up, and let me see what else we. Oh, if we had mashed potatoes, should we get potatoes? We had to mash them. And if we had macaroni and cheese, she actually bought the noodles and added the cheese. Made it from scratch. Biscuits were made from scratch. Pancakes were made from scratch.
Right.
Hell, even sometimes we couldn't afford syrup, we'd have sugar water to pour on the pancakes. So that's where we came up.
Y'all,
And
y'all,
but
y'all, y'all didn't do Bro Rabbit, Jimmy?
we did. We like Mrs. Robinson. We like Butter Rabbit, but there were times that it would be gone because
Right.
sometimes when the food got low, we would make syrup sandwiches. Just bread and syrup.
Mayonnaise sandwiches.
Or mayonnaise sandwiches, yeah. So until my mother got paid once a month as a teacher, our food generally lasts for 3 weeks, and that last week, waiting on payday to come, would be some improvising would have to be done. Sometimes we just had rice with a little butter on it and some sugar. So, but basically, but like you said, we ate at the table. Whatever we had, rice, beans, most of the stuff was made from scratch as best you could because you could afford to buy box food. Buying macaroni and cheese out of the box and buying Kraft cheese and all the other box items and processed items were for people who had money. We couldn't afford those things. And now, the fresh produce section and the meat section is the last place people go visit. They're up and down the aisles with all of the processed box stuff and canned stuff. So there's been a total shift in the way we prepare food, from making it fresh and from scratch to out of the box and out of the can.
You're right, Jimmy. But this is the other thing. When you look at America today, fast food is cheaper to buy than healthy food. So when you start talking about going to the edge of the grocery store where the fruits and vegetables, all the naturally growing foods are, versus going to a McDonald's or a Taco Bell or a Burger King or something like that, you can go to the dollar menu and get you a cheap burger
Yes, you
for
can.
maybe one or a couple of bucks. But what people don't realize, Jimmy, is that a lot of this stuff, a lot of the industry that provides the raw materials that go in this stuff is highly subsidized, by our government. And the reality of it is, Jimmy, folks have a right to be able to eat something that's healthy for them. But at the end of the day, if they're trying to feed a family of 4 or 5 people and they can go to the dollar meal or they can pay 3 times as much in terms of getting fresh fruits and vegetables. I mean, that's an easy no-brainer, unfortunately, Jimmy. And in addition to that, in poorer communities, this, getting access to healthy foods, fruits and vegetables, you're not going to find a farmer's market typically in a poor neighborhood. You're not going to find stores with healthy fruits and vegetables typically in poor communities. You have what you call food deserts in urban communities all across the country.
That's true, Tom. And unfortunately, what happens is all the dented cans, expired foods. Stuff that's going to expire tomorrow somehow always makes it down to the inner city stores to be sold to at higher prices a lot of times to
Right.
poor people. So we got a text in on the chat line from Miss Carol. It says, because we have been making bad choices, we had to find a way to justify it. So we reverted to a standard of affluence, those affluent Africans who being large as having abundance. So I think that points out. I think on the chat line, I think what the person is saying is that we've made being big acceptable. It's not an embarrassment; it's a pride thing now. People are proud to be thick or to be big or to be
But
overweight.
how much, let's look at the practical side of this. How much pride do you have in being unhealthy? How much pride do you have in having to take 5 or 6 meds? Jimmy, I remember talking to a good friend of mine, woman, about 10 years ago. And she said that among her and her friends, she didn't know anyone who was taking any less than at least 4 chronic meds, not
Mm.
something for a specific point in case. And that was someone who was in their early 40s, just turning the corner on 40. All of her friends were on chronic meds, whether it had to do with high blood pressure, which was very common, whether
Very
it had
common.
to do with, onset diabetes, high
Yes.
cholesterol. We're not talking about somebody who was 60, 70 years old. We're talking about someone who's just getting into their 40s. That's very young. And the reality of it is, this is economic catastrophe within our community. And given that the Black community, when you look at overall net worth across the board, is in the lowest part of the totem pole, can't afford to have healthcare catastrophes, because the reality of it is, we know that for the most part, the majority of Americans are one healthcare catastrophe, otherwise a large high ticket item, for being broke.
Yes. What do you mean so it doesn't have to be a healthcare catastrophe, Tom? Um, a lot of folks are just one paycheck from being under the bridge.
True. Very
So
true.
so it doesn't have to, it's not like, you go in there and you
Was
lose your life savings because you're trying to fund a $100,000 heart bypass surgery.
I
So,
would say
but
it was a very conservative estimate. I believe it was at least, unless it's conservative, at least half of Americans had less than $1,000 in savings. Less than half.
yeah, I think it was the number was a little higher, but yes,
I'm
I
being,
think you are right.
I'm
Less
being
than a
conservative.
thousand dollars, or you know, I think it was. I think the number was higher, but the ones who even didn't have $1,000 couldn't even get $8,000 on. Unless they had to go borrow from someone else. Which is fairly sad. But Tom, once again, the
But see,
answer
the point is
is
this: if you have a high hospital bill, and anyone who's ever had to go to the emergency room,
mhm,
anyone who's had to have like a non-basic surgical procedure, that's nothing when you go to any hospital. $1,000.
right. Yeah, with the deductibles being higher now, yeah, it's hard to even to afford to get sick. Yeah, I remember one of my Aetna plans from years ago before Obamacare. I mean, I love this plan. My out of pocket deductible, I think worst case was maybe $1,000, 1,500, but it was an amount that if I had to come up with at any given moment because I had a heart attack or a stroke or something, I could.
Mm-hmm.
Now with a $12,000 deductible that has to be paid annually before your benefits even kick in, it's like, man, if I get sick and now having to come up with 12 grand, I could be in some serious trouble here.
Yep, absolutely.
So
And
so
and I
so
can
with the
and I
time
can
we have left, let's start talking about answers and solutions because I think the answer is to turn the clock back. We have to go
how do
back
you do that when
to
you
learn to
say turn?
make biscuits from
How do you do that?
scratch. Hmm?
How do you do that when you say turn the clock back?
Well, learn to make pancakes from scratch, learn to make biscuits from scratch, and cook. Cook up some eggs, maybe some eggs and rice. Go back to the old days, beans and rice, eggs and rice, and not white rice, not that enriched stuff that where they've bleached out all of the nutrients. Get you some good brown rice that still have nutrients in it to eat. But basically, you have to just start cooking more, especially for our kids.
But Jimmy, I hate to tell you this. Who cooking nowadays?
Well, that's a good point.
Who's cooking nowadays?
That's
I
a
mean,
good point. And my point is that we need to go back to cooking, though. It's not
yes,
so much eating out. I mean, I know it's convenient to go grab fast food where meals are prepared for you, but we need to balance that out some with at least some home cooked meals. And then go back to the old days. I mean, there are times that we didn't have meat for dinner. I mean, I'm making a point now to always have meat with my meal because I remember growing up so many meals where we didn't have meat. And I told myself that, hey, when I grow up one day, I'm going to make sure I always have some meat on the table. But there are times that we had cornbread and greens and cornbread. That would be dinner. Or red beans and rice, or if we had some meat, it was grounded up in it was ground beef and some pinto beans or something, or beans.
Jimmy, I know you're not going to be surprised when I say this, but when I was doing my research for this, and the first thing that came out in America across the board, 42%, a little bit over 42% of all Americans are obese, not overweight, 42% of all Americans are obese. And then they went through the demographics. Of course, African Americans had the highest rate of obesity in America, 50%, a little bit under 50%. I think it's
Wow.
49.8% of African Americans are obese. Latinos, 44.8%. Caucasian Americans, 42 point something percent. But guess what? When we got to the Asian community, guess what that number was? 17%.
I was gonna say 25, but 17.
17% of
Yeah, you don't
Asian
see too
Americans.
many of them being that big, Tom.
Right. But you have to look at their diet. You have to look at their habits.
Yeah, a diet
I
that
mean,
involves
it's not
a lot of vegetables, but also, Tom, a lot of meals that are being cooked and prepared. And they found a way to speed the process up, um, but still they're cooking the food.
yeah. And the other thing, Jimmy, when you look at it, and if you've gone to one of the Asian countries before, where in America and certain industrialized countries, meat is the centerpiece of a meal. When you go to Asian countries, meat is like a condiment. It's kind of an extra or a side item to
True.
the meal. It is not the centerpiece of the meal. And so when you look at their overall state of health, when you look at their longevity, I mean, it's nothing for seeing an article of someone in Japan who's 100, 10, 120 some odd years old. Their diet and their habits at the end of the day is what's making a difference. And the reality of it is, the U.S. overall has become a very sedentary society. When our grandparents and great grandparents were coming up, they were very physically active. Did they eat some junk food? Not Burger King or Kentucky Fried Chicken, but did they eat pork and fat? They ate some of that, but they were very physically active. Today, America is very sedentary. They watch a lot of TV. Let's not even talk about our community television on at least 8 hours a day. But at the end of the day, when you have a sedentary community, you have fatty foods. People don't get a lot of sleep, which is another factor that contributes to obesity as well. It helps regulate, one, obviously the body being in complete relaxation. Two, sleep helps give your body time to regulate, gives the brain time to be able to do what it needs to do with the body at night. And if you're not getting enough sleep, it interrupts that process. And so there are a lot of very simple factors that contribute to that we're just ignoring. And that's because we're trying to keep up with the Jones.
Well, Tom, I think we need to publish the old school, old ways cookbook
Mm-hmm.
and bring back the dishes we grew up on. Like I said, that de-emphasizes meat and emphasizes more of the stuff, the greens and the cornbread with just a few pieces of meat in there, turkey or pork to go with it. And like I said, growing up, we couldn't afford a lot of meat. Cheap ground beef and chicken wings were pretty much the our meat of choice. I mean, it was unheard of for us to have a steak growing up, and my mother just couldn't afford it. So we had to stretch our food budget, for multiple kids out the best that we could. And it just seemed like we have too much of an abundance today, where we don't have to do that. So when then you couple that with people not cooking, and the combination of all the food that's available being locked into our homes now. Our kids don't go out and play, and everything is a video game or television, or like you said, sitting at a desk or at your computer all day long, and not exercising, not even walking our dogs anymore. So when you add all that together, that is a formula for disaster.
And Jimmy, I say this quite tongue in cheek, and it's kind of funny, but it ain't so funny. Even the freaking pets, dogs and cats are obese nowadays, man. I mean, I don't know if you've seen this, but I have some relatives who got some doggone pets, dogs, man. They're about as wide as they are long. It's crazy. They're feeding them table food. And this table
Yes,
food, I mean, you got to remember, Jimmy, a lot of this food that we're eating, especially meat, with America being a meat-based society, there are hormones in this food. And these hormones in this food, they're toxic. They make you bloated. They make you sick. And even the pets are about as sick as the human beings. But at the end of the day, I know we're running short on time. But Jimmy, the only way we're going to deal with this, the only way we're going to help resolve this, we have got, to your point, eat more of a natural plant-based diet. That's not to say that everybody's got to give up meat, because everybody's not going to do that. But you
Right.
have to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables. You got to go to a more plant-based diet. Number two, you got to be active. One good thing I will say about this pandemic, I have seen more people, families, walking, riding bicycles, getting
Oh,
active
you
because
there?
they're going stare crazy in their house, so they got to get outside. That is one positive that I've seen from this pandemic, is that more people are out getting fresh air, taking walks, riding bicycles, just doing anything to get out of the house. And one of the things that's overlooked, Jimmy, we don't get enough rest.
Right.
I mean, there are some people who say they don't need it, but the body and the brain needs enough time in order for it to heal itself, in order for it to do what it needs to do to ensure that the body can be balanced and healthy. We don't drink enough water.
Well,
We
that's true
don't.
too.
There are some people who don't drink water at all, and that water, our body is 74% water. Most people who are sick, the first thing that the doctor's office or the emergency room usually does is they have to put something in their veins because they're dehydrated.
Yeah, you have to get the IV going. Yes,
Absolutely.
caller.
Hi, I'm incensed at this conversation.
Okay.
So,
So, folks, for those of you listening, it sounds like we have a caller in, and maybe we have a question or a statement that Jimmy is going to be presenting
manufacturers,
to our show momentarily.
manufacturing,
So, we
whatever,
appreciate your patience.
and
But at the end of the day, folks,
yeah, so
it's
it
a
really
at
comes
least
down to
a
making
3 to 4 legged
So,
stool that we have
your
to
point, yeah, great to say.
become more serious about
We
if
should
we're going
go
to be
back to
healthy,
basics, and
if
that's
we're going to be
great. To
happy,
your
if we're
point,
going to
I can
live
remember growing
longer,
up.
healthier lives.
Tommy said
Because at the
this.
end of
Right.
the day,
Um,
it doesn't make
my mother
very much
cooked
sense
every freaking day
to
or
have
every other day
economic
out of his
success or make a
cooking
lot
and
of money,
know
and you can't do
and then
anything because you're in a
leftovers
hospital bed.
or
And so
whatever.
at the end of the day, there
Um,
are a few
but we
fundamental
still eat
things that we have
real
to
food.
do
So here's
if
the
we're going to
problem.
have a healthy, productive life. Your
Bottom
health
line,
is your wealth.
processed food. So
Okay. Hey,
processed
Tom.
food
Yes,
Pause for
sir.
a second. We got the caller in, and she's telling about her childhood experience
rampant.
growing up and how her mother cooked.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you can hear the caller.
I cannot.
Okay.
But
Caller,
I hear
go
some
ahead.
people
Finish
that
your story.
hear what they're saying.
Can you hear
Yes,
me?
go ahead and finish your story, but speak up.
Okay. So yeah, Tommy said it. My mom cooked. We had fresh
Yeah, I
cooked
still
dinner
can't
or
hear. I
leftovers.
can.
We
It's
ate
very faint.
real
It
food.
is faint.
I
Or maybe
didn't
you can
grow up
repeat what
during
the
fast
caller is
food
saying.
era. Um, but the bottom line is the problem is processed food.
She's saying
So
that her parents cooked growing up, and that the problem is processed food.
Right. Correct.
processed food is not real
So
food,
maybe Jimmy, that
and
means you can
God
kind of
made our
summarize
body
what the
to
caller's saying,
break down,
because yeah, we
absorb
can't hear him.
nutrients
Yeah, she's
Here.
basically going through
from.
just saying that processed food is not real.
Correct.
Am I going to have to stop every 3 sentences?
Well,
It's
we're having a hard time hearing you, caller. It's very low, so
right.
I'm having to.
I've got it up as high as I can and
I
on the
understand.
speakerphone. I'm right. Okay. So yeah. So God made our body, designed our body to process food, but this
So Jimmy,
isn't
can you
food, so
summarize
your
what the
body
caller is saying?
doesn't know what to do with
Yes.
it. So
So
it
soon as she
Alright.
pauses.
any nutrients out, if there's any in there. It uses the calories for energy. That's what it's designed to do. And anything else that it doesn't recognize as
Okay,
food,
Jimmy, can you summarize what she's saying,
it
and then we can
stores
close
in
out?
our fat cells
Right.
because it just doesn't know what to do with the stuff.
Okay,
Um,
caller. Let me summarize for everyone
and
else who's having a hard time hearing you. So she's basically saying that processed foods contain a lot of sugar, and but not a lot of nutrients.
nope, I didn't say
Correct.
that at all.
So the body processes whatever nutrients it can from the food that you eat, and with the stuff that they can't really process, you know, I guess gets absorbed and gets filtered out by the kidneys and the liver. Uh, but basically, I think the overall point was is
No,
that
didn't say
you
that.
want to try to eat foods
Wow.
and stick to foods that where your body can actually extract nutrients from them. So if you're eating a bunch of processed foods that don't have a lot of nutrients in it, then all your body's left to absorb is the salt and the sugar and the other chemicals
No.
that are in the food.
No, that she brings up, the caller brings up a very
Okay,
valid
that's
point, an excellent
not
point.
what I
Matter of
said.
fact,
But
you have to eat
anyway,
live, active foods,
and
and
then
quite
add on
frankly,
top of
the
that,
rawer the better. Because I mean,
because
when
these
you
foods
processed
do not
foods are
have
dead foods,
adequate amount of
and
nutrients,
even when you cook
your
foods,
body
and
is
we overcook a
gonna
lot of our
say
foods, you're
tell
killing
you
the
that it's still
enzymes in the
hungry.
food, and
It's
so
not
you're
really
even if you're
hungry
eating
for more
vegetables
food or more
or meats in
calories.
that
It's
case,
really hungry
vegetables in
for
particular, if you're
nutrients
killing
that
the
you aren't
active
giving it. That's
enzymes
another
in the
problem. And
food
then on
supply,
top of
you're not
that,
getting very
you
much nutrition, and so
uh,
therefore your body continues
you two
continues
are
to
keep
crave
talking about
what
sugar.
it's not getting, and that
Sugar
is
is
real
so
food,
bad
active
for
nutrition.
you
There's something to
that
be said, Jimmy. I don't
that
know if
the
you ever heard this.
breakdown,
I'm
the
pretty sure
chemical
everybody's doctor told
breakdown
us.
of sugar in your
An apple a
body
day
is
helps keeps the doctor
paramount
away,
to a
but there was
drug.
some
Literally, it
scientific
makes you crave more,
truism
just
in
like
the fact
drugs
that live,
would.
active,
So
raw foods
people feed their kids all this
provide
crap.
fiber for your
You
body,
give
help
your
clean your
kids
system out,
cocaine. It's
provide
about the
nutrients
same
so that you
thing.
can have the
Then,
energy and the vitality that you need over the
no
long
matter
term.
how bad you tell people the stuff is,
True.
they still eat it in
Let me-
abundance and somehow make excuses.
And
Okay.
Jimmy, I think
Caller,
we're probably
It's
right
really
about
we're
out
coming
of
up on
time.
our
for that.
time limit, so we need to wrap the show up. But thank you for calling in for the comments and the input. So let me drop our call there. So I think the caller makes some good points. Tom, you make some good points. And actually, even here recently, I've changed from a lot of processed dog food and started feeding my dogs more fresh meat, fresh vegetables in their dog food. I mean, I got a special meat grinder just to grind their dog food up now, as opposed to feeding them a lot of bagged dog food where all the nutrients are baked out of the dog food. So I think if that's good advice for the dogs, it's probably good advice for people too, to get back to eating fresh food and food that you prepare with your own hands, as opposed to food prepared by someone else's hand or that's put into a box or a can.
Absolutely.
So we're a little bit over our time limit, so let's go ahead and wrap up. And we still didn't quite get into the cultural aspect of it, of how we accept being overweight and accept being obese, and there's no shame in it anymore. And I think we probably need to go back to feeling a little social pressure from being out of shape, overweight, and then being unhealthy.
But Jimmy, when the majority of the population is overweight or obese, I mean, think of it. 2/3 of all Americans are overweight or obese. And when we look at our community, we're talking 75+%. And so the norm is being unhealthy, being overweight.
I understand because I'm in that group too, so I need to get out of that group. I think all of us that are in that group need to start working hard to get out of it, and probably
And the
one of the
crazy
best
thing
ways to
about
get out of it is start eating and cooking at home.
And Jimmy, this is the crazy thing about it. I've talked to, I remember historically, years ago talking to women who were what we would consider to be normal weight back in the Soul Train days. And now those are the folks that they're being talked, those are the folks that are being teased and talked about, talking, oh, you're too puny, you're underweight, you're sickly, something's wrong with you. These are people, Jimmy, who would typically be considered normal weight. And these are the folks who are being meddled and teased now
I
by
know.
folks who are on the other side of that.
I was watching some Supremes videos today, and man, back in the '60s, Diana Ross and
Yes.
Mary Wilson. I can't think of the other Supreme, but man, they would be considered just skinny today.
Yeah,
That
they
was
would be
probably just
considered
normal
what,
size back then.
in our community, Jimmy, they would be considered anorexic.
Yes. So, well, Tom, let's go ahead and wrap up. We're over time, and so I think we brought a little light to the problem. I like to say that it's time for us to turn the clock back and go get back into the kitchen and start
Yep.
cooking and eating at our own tables. There's nothing wrong with fast food every now and then, nothing wrong with a treat, but do it in moderation. And let's find a way to start exercising more. So,
Yep.
and with that being said, Tom, I'm going to go ahead and give you the last word, then we're going to close it out.
All right, folks, we want to thank you for joining us again this Wednesday evening. Tune in every Wednesday evening at 9 Central Time to Black Men Speak, where we talk about some of the most provocative issues in our community. We thank you very much for joining us again. Make sure that you subscribe to our show, like this show in particular. We are more than welcome to your comments, your feedback. Even recommendations on topics in the future that you would like to hear us talk about. So again, thank you for joining us. Continue to fight the good fight, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Have a good evening.
Yeah, next Wednesday, 9 p.m. Central Time. Thank you.